afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our monthly webinar. As Mike mentioned earlier, we ask that you put your phone on mute. We will open the questions up at the end by using the chat feature, which you'll find on the right-hand side of your screen. And everyone was emailed the agenda that Mike had up on the screen before he opened up the webinar presentation. And we will be going through some topics on the agenda here. So we're going to talk about the current 3.0 news first. We still have 8 more months left of 3.0. And then March 15, 2021, we plan on implementing our 3.1. We'll talk a little bit about news coming up on that. Then we'll talk about the topics of the month. So every month we're going to be picking a few topics to cover. We had our May 7th training on the 3.1 New York State specifics. Today we'll be covering 2 topics, reduced earnings and part of body. And then as I mentioned before, we'll save all of the questions for the end. So the first 3.0 news that we're going to talk about, and these are the news topics that have been posted since our last webinar. This one was posted on March 26th. So we made an announcement that we now have available the WCIO codes for the COVID-19, cause of injury 83 for pandemic, and nature code of 83 for COVID-19. We're still seeing COVID-19 cases being reported without these codes, and references in the accident narrative description as COVID-19 or coronavirus. So we ask that you please file your 402s updating these codes on the FROIs as in accordance with our element requirement table. In 3.0, we have the severity rankings listed as Y, which means that these should be updated if they were previously reported incorrectly. Also on March 26th, we announced that we would be setting 2 new edits effective October 1st. One edit we announced would be on the date of injury, applying error 064 for date of injury must be on or after 2019 if the nature of injury is COVID or the cause is pandemic. We had also announced on that date that we are going to be applying a new population restriction for type of loss. But then on April 6th, we pulled the type of loss edit. We decided that we were not going to be setting an edit for type of loss, so you can continue to report them based on the IAIBC data dictionary. So we are still seeing type of loss 03, which does not seem to be applicable since the definition indicates that's for cumulative injury. You know, we understand 01 traumatic injury, 02 OD, but the 03 cumulative seems out of place on these. We don't have an edit that rejects those, but it just doesn't seem to be appropriate. So please follow the definition as stated for type of loss in the IABC data dictionary when reporting on these claims. We also updated our FAQ number 19 on April 28th. We updated this based on feedback that we received from claim administrators at the December monthly webinar. The FAQ now references the core to be filed within 3 days of the CA or CB, and the core can also be filed within 5 days if the CB or the CA is rejected. We also put in that the letter can be either mailed or emailed to the WCB claims filing at wcb.ny.gov. We just want to note that this paper process is being viewed as a short-term solution. We're going to be adopting 3.1, and we are currently pursuing a request to change the standard. We opened an IRR with the Claims EDI Committee. It's number 900, and we're requesting a new data element for benefit change reason code on the CB and the CA to eliminate the paper process. So I know some of you are IAIBC members of the Claims Committee. If you are interested in joining this work group, which meets on Thursdays, please email Greg Lutz at IABC to let him know that you're interested in joining the work group to help us get those new codes. If you're not a member of the IABC but you have suggestions for the new codes, please email eClaims at wcb.ny.gov, and it will help us to get these new codes to explain why New York needs to have codes and eliminate this paper process. As of right now, it's been challenging to get these new codes. We have been meeting now for about 5 months. We have been getting pushback because this seems to be a New York-specific type need. And when you have 38 states filing in a national standard, it is difficult sometimes to get a new data element added just because one state needs it. So claim administrators who understand our need, it helps if you join in the work group to explain that we want to eliminate this paper process and replace it with a data element with new codes. Okay, this is a screenshot of our event table for the AQ and the AU. So in Release 3.0, we do have the AQ requirement listed to be filed when a claim administrator acquires a claim. It's required 10 days after acquisition. And then the AU can be filed if you get a rejection on the AQ because it got rejected because the previous claim administrator did not file an OO, then you'll have 30 days after that rejection. Or you can just go ahead and file the AQ instead of the AU instead of the AQ, even though the AU requires more data elements than the AQ, and file it within 10 days of the acquisition. So we just want to remind everyone of the importance of this because we found that claim administrators are not filing the AQs and the AUs upon acquisition, and it is affecting the drug formulary dashboard assignments. We want to stress the importance of the fact that these should be filed on any active cases, including closed cases in which you're paying medical, because drug formulary requests could be received and the dashboard will trigger. And if we don't know that you are the new claim administrator on the case, then it will not trigger properly. So we also want to remind you that the board could impose a Section 25(3)E penalty for failure to file this required form. It's not a penalty that would be issued as part of the monitoring unit payer compliance, but it is a penalty that is in statute and could be imposed at the case level. In addition to the AQ and the AU as part of the drug formulary dashboard issue, we have found that insurer funds are not getting updated. So if the claim administrator is not changing, but the insurer is changing, maybe you made a mistake on the previously filed form, or we had been not having the correct primary insurer on the case. When we receive your FROI, we'll send you a request for a FROI 02 at the case level. Please make sure it gets to the appropriate person to file that requested FROI 02. If you have policy information that supports your reported FROI and you don't feel you should file a FROI 02, please reply to those requests, because if we do not have the proper primary insurer on file based on the proof of coverage reporting that we have in our insurance compliance system, again, the drug formulary dashboard will not trigger properly. And if we do not get the FROI-02 requested and we don't receive a response from you, a penalty could be imposed on this as well pursuant to 25(3)(e) for failure to file a required form. So please make sure that you are notifying us of the proper insurer and the proper claim administrator for the drug formulary process. Okay, at this point, I am going to turn it over to Mike, and he's going to talk about 3.1 news.
Thank you, Mary Beth. We've had a couple things happen since last month's webinar in April. So as those that attended in April know, we're now posting the slide deck as well as a video recording of this presentation after each of the monthly webinars. So if you weren't able to attend, you're able to go back and listen to it. We also started posting FAQs for Release 3.1. Those are on the eClaims page, and we found an announcement on May 11th. You'll notice now that there's an extra option in the FAQs. You can select for Release 3.1. Also not on here, but did not make the slide deck, but we've also recently announced the May 7th training webinar. That presentation as well as that recording are also now posted on the board website under the eClaims presentation section. For the topics of the month, as Mary Beth mentioned, we're going to focus on a couple things each month and go over those for everyone. One of those is part of body. Very important. Those that attended the training webinar know we talked about Release 3.0 and that you can only report one part of body, and you don't have the ability to put left, right, or bilateral. So now with part of body, you are able to, in Release 3.1, report up to 10 occurrences. And we're going to use that for a few different things here in New York. One of those is the FROI tab in eCase. For anyone that uses eCase, you'll know that the latest values tab within there currently displays that one body part. It will now display the multiple body parts as well as the left, right, and bilateral. The other important one is the medical portal. As Mary Beth just mentioned a little while ago.
And you join the meeting, yes?
Just a reminder, we're asking folks not to unmute yourself during the meeting. So the medical portal has a case search within it for providers. As ANCR or ODNCR has been established on the case, that will be returned to the providers. If it has not been established by the board, we display the eClaims data that you submit to that provider for those parts of body. So it is very important to that formulary system as well as any future expansion of the medical portal. On the element requirement table, part of body code is data element 36. So on the FROI, again, it expands to a variable segment. It's going to allow up to 10 occurrences. And we are using, per the IA standard, the WCIO part of body codes. So if you have questions regarding those, they are posted directly on the WCIO website. You'll see here some of those part of body injured codes that require left, right, and bilateral. A lot of these are going to look very familiar, and all of them should look familiar. So those exist today in 3.0. We are just now able to get left, right, and bilateral for each of these. They also allow for the reporting of fingers and toes, so you can actually let us know which finger or toe is injured. So you'll see here you can report index fingers, first toes, and the other fingers as well. For part of body injured location code, that is a new data element in release 3.1. That's DN 421. On the FROI, that is going to be mandatory conditional on the OO, O4, and AU. That condition is going to be if there's one of the codes on that previous slide, then this data element would be required. For DN 422, part of body injured fingers, toes location code. Again, mandatory conditional on the OO, O4, and AU. That condition is it's required if that part of body is fingers other than thumb or the toes. Available upon request on the FROI AQ, and that is right per the IA standard. So that is due to the severity rankings within the IAIBC standard. So with part of body, there are some population restrictions as well. So there is a new edit, DN 420. That 045 you see there is an error code within the IAIBC standard. Value is less than required by jurisdiction. So if the maintenance type code equals OO, O4, AU, UR, or maintenance type code equals O2, where previously accepted AQ is filed in the past, a DN 420, that number of part of body injured, has to be greater than 0. So element error text, very plain there, must be greater than 0 on the FROI. That's just letting you know that it's required on the FROI. So that ties into those other conditions I just spoke about. With that, I am going to turn it back over to Mary Beth, and she is going to go over severity rankings.
Okay, can you see my screen?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So severity rankings in the standard, we just wanted to cover a little bit. In release 3.1, the element requirement table looks a little different than the 3.0. It is color-coded by the IABC Systems Committee in conjunction with the data population rules. So we can only rank the requirements based on the color coding that's listed on the first worksheet of the instructions. So mandatory means that if you don't send us that data element, we will reject it. And then the mandatory conditional has specific conditions that are listed on the conditions requirement worksheet. AR means send it if available, and we ask that you do send it to us if you have it available. Even though we won't reject it if you don't send it, we do ask that you send it to us, and if you do send it, we will set the edits that are on the edit matrix table, and which include the DN error message and the population restrictions. And then AA, again, we ask that you send it to us if available, but those don't have any edits. The NA means that we will ignore it if you send it. We won't display it on our paper forms, and you'll never see that in eCase. So the second topic that we decided to cover for 3.1 today is reduced earnings. So in 3.1, they removed the references to the SHROI RE and retired the MTC. The reduced earnings variable segment is now available on the APCACB IPRB, SX, and SU. So the CA is the big one that it's been added to for 3.1, that you'll be able to do the reduced earnings segments on the CA. Some of these others were available in 3.0, but everybody thought of the SHROI RE MTC as the only MTC to report reduced earnings. So there was a lot of miscommunication in 3.0 on how reduced earnings should be reported. So I was a member of the IABC work group who looked at the reporting in 3.0. I shared a study of New York State reporting with this work group. And what we decided at the IABC Claims Committee was to provide a better way to report reduced earnings in a variable segment and add a couple new data elements to it. Like I mentioned earlier, adding the CA and also the sync up is something that are the new MTCs that are being added. It's very important to understand the Section 4 variable segment population rules. The variable segment is to be used when the weekly rate varies, and the benefit segment is the most current TP rate. So that's something you really want to keep in mind, is that's how you're going to use this variable segment 3.1. And it is used for benefit type code 070 temporary partial. So the new data elements that I mentioned earlier that are going to benefit us are going to be the one that's replacing DN 242, the reduced earnings week number. We changed that to NA because we found that it just did not help us in 3.0, and we are going to now be getting the week start date and the week end date to replace this week number. So both of these data elements are going to be required on all of the MTCs where you're going to be sending in the variable segment for reduced earnings. And if the number is greater than 0 for the number counter, then you'll have to send us the week start date and the week end date. One thing I want to note is that DN 415, if the end date is less than 7 days from the start date, when the week is not full, is something that you can put in there. So it does not have to be a full week. And that was another IRR that was open in the Claims Committee and clarified in the data dictionary. So the weekly amount paid, new data element that we'll be getting is DN 435, and that's the reduced earning net weekly amount paid by the claim administrator after the adjustment or credit, if applicable, is applied. Again, there was an IRR open that to clarify that if the period is less than 7 days, the VLU may represent the actual amount of the earnings for that period. So that's something to keep in mind. And this is the important rate that we're going to be looking at because that's what is being paid by the claim administrator. The existing 3.0 data element we're going to continue to take, and that's the actual reduced earnings. That's the weekly wage that's being paid by the employer. And that's what's so confusing in 3.0 today, is because people don't realize what that rate really is supposed to be reporting. That's weekly wage being paid by employer. That's what the definition says in 3.0, and that's what the definition will continue to say in 3.1. And both of these data elements will be required on all of the MTCs where you'll send a variable segment for reduced earnings. So we've applied a couple edits to enforce the rules for reduced earnings. So one edit we're applying is on the reduced earnings net weekly amount due by claim administrator. So we're applying error 064 invalid data relationship. So if reduced earnings net weekly amount due by claim administrator is greater than 0, then there must exist a BTC 070. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to enforce that the only BTC that you should be reporting in reduced earnings is the 070 temporary partial. And the other edit that we will be applying is on the DN error message table. It's a standard edit. It's a new edit, error 122. and that is must be greater than reduced earnings week start date, and that will be applied to DN 415 reduced earnings week end date. Some important rules in the standard that we want to stress are in the section for variable segment population rules, which explain that they cannot exceed 52 weeks. They have unique start end dates. Once it's accepted, it will never be reported again on further MTCs, and that the temporary partial benefits should be reported in consecutive date order. So these are all important rules to keep in mind when reporting. The other important rule to keep in mind is that whenever the MTC is required in the benefit segment for 070 and multiple weeks of TP is being paid, the gross weekly amount effective date, the net weekly amount, and the net weekly amount effective date in the benefit segment will represent the most current temporary partial rate and date reported for benefits or paid. So that's what goes in the benefit segment, is the most current. And then in the variable segments for reduced earnings, that's when you break it down week by week. And this is only when the weekly rate varies. That's when you use the reduced earnings variable segment. Okay, the other thing we want to touch on is that we made some changes to our eClaims website. So at this point, I am going to go off of PowerPoint and switch over to our website and just run through some of the changes here. So, let's see. Did I lose you?
You're still there.
We're still there?
No,
I was afraid it closed out. Okay, so on the eClaims overview page, which is still a link right from the board's homepage with the little shortcut of eClaims, it will bring you to the overview page. So what we did is we divided up from 3.0 and 3.1, since we are now have two different sets of tables published. So on 3.0 side, yes?
You can't see the screen.
Can't see the screen? Okay.
No.
Back to share. Because I think I did log out, Mike.
I will share mine.
Okay.
And have to walk through.
All right, and I'm logging back in as you. All right, I'm back in. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, I will not close out of the webinar this time. So this is the overview page, and this is where we have our 3.0 tables still published, but this is where we published our new 3.1 tables. So we still have shared links between both 3.0 and 3.1. It hasn't changed. Our eClaims inquiry, data entry, trading partner registration, the other online services, news, FAQs, which Mike mentioned earlier. We added a new bullet for 3.1 specifically. All of our presentations, 3.0 are maintained there, and then all of our new 3.1 are posted there, and our trading partner webinars, which are the monthly webinars as well as any other kind of trading partner webinars that we may schedule. So this is kind of a shared link site here. And then divided out, we have our 3.0 and our 3.1. So going to the 3.1 specifically, you'll see is where we posted our tables and our implementation guide. So going to the table side, you'll see this is where we have our traditional IIBC event table, element requirement table, and edit matrix table. So just as we've been going through on May 7th, and now we're going through on our monthly webinars, we'll be talking about events, element requirements, severity rankings, and then the edit matrix, which includes the DN error messages, the data population, the sequencing, and we will make sure that we're here to help you so that you can code all of these in time for the 3/15/2021 implementation of 3.1. We are also going to be maintaining some reference documents. So the reference documents we'll continue to maintain are the list of the industry code and the manual classification codes. We have no plans to change those. We use the NAICS codes for industry, and we use the NYSERD codes for manual classification. For 3.1, we created 2 new reference documents. So this is something that we did show at the May 7th 2-hour training, and that's a chart of the DNs that trigger on the O2. So this is a reference document that we created to help you understand when an O2 should be triggered. So in upcoming months, we will get into talking about the change O2 process and how New York plans on applying the edits based on the Section 4 rules and when an O2 should be triggered. For now, you can use this quick reference guide as a shortcut to the element requirement table to see when New York expects for an O2 to be triggered. And then we have the summary of changes document that we created, which is about a 20-page document that lists all of the coding changes that need to be made, the new MTCs, and everything that's changing from 3.0 to 3.1. So this is the main resource for all of our changes. We do have 2 email boxes separated. One for your 3.0 questions continues to go to eClaims, and then we created a new mailbox for 3.1, which is eClaims 3.1 at WCB. And as we make changes to these tables, we will publish them out on our eClaims changelog. We don't have a changelog here yet on 3.1 because this is our first edition of our tables, but we will continue with following the IIBC rules, in which we give at least 6 months notification of any changes that we make to our tables to allow time for claim administrators to code the changes. So we have received some feedback from our first edition of our tables, and we appreciate your feedback. We are in the process of making some adjustments to these tables and preparing our first eClaims changelog. So once we publish that, we will send out an email blast to all of our trading partners, all of the contacts listed in your eClaims trading partner profiles who are listed as either an eClaims administrator, a business contact, or a technical contact. So if you want them to receive, anyone for your organization to receive these notifications, eClaims administrators can add the person as one of these contacts, and then we will make sure that they receive the notifications as part of our email blast. All right, so we do encourage you to stay informed, and we do appreciate your suggestions. So you can visit our website and receive notifications. There is a notifications section there under the eClaims overview. And then feedback for 3.1 tables can be sent to our eClaims 3.1 mailbox. Questions regarding our current process can continue to go to the eClaims mailbox. And you can also follow the board on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. A recording of this webinar will be placed on YouTube and on the eClaims website, as well as any FAQs that we may pull out of today's webinar. We'll continue to add to that 3.1 bullet point. So thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.